Welcome back to the Free Kit Martin podcast. Happy New Year. Oh my, there's a bug somewhere, running around and getting up your nose and causing sickness in families. That's what happened over the holiday at my house. We're on the other side of it. How about you, Stacy?
Oh, I'm feeling it a little bit right now. It just hit me this morning, but I'll be okay.
Oh, God bless you, man. It is, once you're on the other side of it, though, it just starts to feel so good because you're in a new year. And believe me, there's some goodness happening to you here in the next couple of days. You'll be on the other side of it. I wanted to talk today about, let's just go back to the beginning, because one of the things that I have found online recently is that bond hearing. And they did a lot of zooming in on you, by the way, on that. I call you, your whole row there, the frontline players. Who was sitting there with you?
One of the person sitting to my right was Adam Brazil, and he is a gentleman that I know here in Tennessee that was wrongfully convicted he spent 12 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. It was a case of misidentification. And so I asked him, I had just not even met him yet, and called him and asked him for his help, for some guidance. And he said, well, I don't really know you and I really don't know Kit, but I'll go with you to this. I need to judge for myself. So he went that day with us. And when we were finished with that bond hearing, he said, Stacy, this is a dog and pony show. That man's innocent. And I said, yes, Adam, he is. So that was Adam. And then Donna, my friend Donna Tony, who is the register of deeds here in Manchester. She's been my best friend for years. She was there with me. And then Joe Marchesoni, which is a lifelong friend of both Chris and mine.
Okay, so those are the frontline players. Some of the other family members, like Amanda, who you saw on the stand, who is Chris's sister, and, some of the other family members were sitting back. And then they were also going over to, the victims' families. And, especially Ed Donzero's girlfriend, I think her name is Sally. She was just a beauty. And I did feel, I had some, it struck me that Ed Donzero in this story, what a sad story, right? He was a neighbor and doing neighborly things. They were able to figure out that he had grabbed his weapon and ran to the help of what may have been Pam Phillips, who also passed away in this horrible tragedy. And then the charade began. And when I say charade, this case for Kit Martin, I don't know how into this you have been, but man, there is zero evidence, Stacy. Zero evidence. I mean, displayed on every single day of that trial. But didn't you feel like there was some sort of game of dirty poker kind of going on in the background?
There was one piece of hard evidence, one piece, and it wasn't against Chris. Joan Harmon had Pam Phillips, one of the victims' phone, and that is an undisputed fact. She took it actually to an AT&T store a month after the murders and tried to get them to open the phone. And when they went to look at the phone, they realized it was the Pam Phillips phone, and they had to call the police. And Joan gathered her kids very quickly and scurried out of the AT&T store. And we saw that on a film clip, in the trial.
Ms. Harmon's fixing to come up on screen here in a few seconds in your top right-hand corner through the glass windows, along with her 3 children, entering the door now. There they are right there, speaking with one of the associates at the AT&T store.
Could you point that out again, Ms. Harmon?
Ms. Harmon's the one in the pink jacket right here, walking behind the associate, and her 3 children following. There's a counter that's right here that they just walked up to. The gentleman then the associate takes the phone in a different camera angle, takes the phone, takes it around into the back of the office, into the office area where the manager determines who the phone belongs to through the registration of the IMEI number. About a minute and 20 seconds or so. Then she'll speak with the associates briefly, and then she'll come over to here, call for her kids, and then they'll leave.
So I had a real problem with the fact that she left the store and then they didn't even question her, to my knowledge. They just drove by her house. She should have been arrested, or at least brought in for questioning.
And apparently, you know, when Noiseworthy was on the stand, Detective Noiseworthy of the Christian County Sheriff's Office, when he was on the stand, he said that her phone had been scrutinized. That was all just part of that. That's how he testified. That was all just part of that, like that report. That was just part of that. And they kept kind of sweeping anything about Joan underneath the rug, like sort of, here's another example. They would ask him during the trial, did you, get a hold of Joan after this? I mean, what? Well, she called me while I was in there. What? She called you. And then what did you do? Oh, well, I left and, did a drive-by of her house over there in Also, he got a call from William Stokes.
You learned that the AT&T store on Fort Campbell Boulevard in Hopkinsville had come into possession of Pam Phillips' cell phone. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Did you get a call from an AT&T employee?
No, sir.
Dispatch?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you respond to the AT&T store?
I did, sir.
Okay, and I believe your report indicates you watched video. The store itself had surveillance video.
I did, sir.
And you watched that video, and it was clear that Joan Harmon was the person who brought this phone in.
It appeared that way, yes, sir.
Okay. Your report says when I viewed it, meaning the surveillance video, it was apparent that the person was Joan Martin. So is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when you retrieved the phone from the AT&T store, it had already been wiped or restored to factory settings. Is that right?
Correct, sir. Mm-hmm.
In fact, while you were still in the store, you got a call from Joan Harmon, didn't you?
I believe that's correct.
She was trying to tell you the story about how she came.
Sustained. Judge, can we approach? No. Sustained.
You also got a call from William Stokes while you were still at the store, right? Or soon after?
According to my supplement, yes, sir.
Okay. You retrieved, or you took the phone into custody?
I did, sir.
And has that been sent on to electronic crimes or
It was,
wherever you sent the other phones?
It was part of all that, yes, sir.
Okay.
Actually, I did read later, William Stokes had tried to call him and he missed the call and he tried to call him back and they never made contact. That's what finally came out about that. I didn't realize that until I read it somewhere later. So we don't know why William Stokes was calling him. You were talking about the evidence or lack thereof. The only thing that was turned in as evidence against Chris, which wasn't evidence, was the family of Cal and Pam Phillips turned in some discs that were from a prior court martial that are questionable whether they even belonged to Kit Martin. Someone was helping clean up and found like a spent 22 casing, which never was matched to anything. There was a 45 casing that was found on the porch, I believe, 5 months after the murders, after we have learned from our tip line that 32 people from the Christian County Sheriff's Department and also combined, I think, with the state police, but there were 32 people at Cal and Pam's house investigating, and they supposedly missed this 45 caliber shell casing, which, by the way, when it was found, quote unquote, found 5 months after the murders, was still bright and shiny brass and wasn't corroded, didn't appear to be fire. I mean, there was nothing wrong with, the casing could not have sat out in the weather that long, in my opinion.
Right. And in the opinion of Court TV. Let's take a listen to what Julie had to say when she interviewed you a couple of months ago.
Tell you what has bothered me, Stacey, about the trial, because as you know, at Court TV, we don't have a horse in the race. So I like to say I call balls and strikes when I sit and give kind of like the color commentary and the play-by-play commentary, just like in a ball game with the trials. And we explain things that are happening that pertain to evidentiary matters. We assess witnesses, their credibility, believability. The brass was what I couldn't get past. So to take everybody back, the facts were that investigators processed that porch and found nothing. Several detectives all over the porch found not a single thing. Your husband's a military man. I would imagine that he probably does a lot of shooting in his backyard. If I remember correctly, there was a lot of testimony, and if you just leave your brass laying out there, it's going to get, worn and tarnished, all that. So if that spent cartridge casing was on that porch for all that time in the weather, it would get tarnished. This was a shiny new spent casing that was uncovered, by somebody connected to one of the victims. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it placed in the hands of somebody who serves in government?
I can speak to what you first said, and I'm not a ballistics person. I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But yes, to answer one question, Kit often shot behind his house, and also there was a range behind the victim's house, which they had fired weapons before. As you mentioned, it was shiny, and if the story was the way that they told it, the shell casing had been out for 5 months?
Right.
And like you said, it was shiny. And I think there's some other things that will come out from that. But again, I can't address that at this moment.
Sure.
I can tell you that maybe what you don't know is that an American hero who fought 30 years for your freedom, my freedom, all these people's freedom, is sitting behind bars, and he's an innocent man. They knew, absolutely knew, that they didn't have a case, had nothing on him because there was nothing to have. They offered him 5 to 13-year plea bargain. And because of his integrity, he said, no, I didn't do this. I'm innocent. And he is innocent.
Wow, that's interesting to note that they offered him a plea agreement that he rejected because at that time, and still, he's consistently maintained his innocence.
So yesterday I did have the pleasure to visit with Kit, and I just want to come right out here and say that when I got to the prison, to my surprise, there was some ammunition in my glove compartment that I had never seen in my life.
Some what?
Ammunition.
Ammunition. You had bullets in your...
It was a box of ammunition in my glove compartment, and I had just been in that glove compartment a week ago to put in a registration and insurance card into my glove compartment. And so when they did the car search...
Whoa, back up. Did they do a car search last time you were there?
No, but they have started doing that for some reason.
Oh, that was just something new. Okay.
Yeah, they didn't just check my car. They were checking other cars. So when they were checking my car, I almost didn't get to go in and see him after driving 6 hours because I guess somebody misplaced and put their ammunition in the wrong car. That's all I can figure. But I am going to come right out here and say this. I'm not going to scare off. I'm not going away. And I will not stop trying to get Kit's freedom until Kit is actually freed. So, that doesn't scare me, Joni, or whomever may have put that in my car. But this box of ammunition, I absolutely had never seen in my life. So
let's just talk about Scott Smith for a second. Do you feel like, Stacey, in your opinion, do you feel like he lied to the grand jury?
He 100% lied to the grand jury. I don't feel like it. He did. The Cellbrite phone records will show that he lied. He testified that Kit's phone and the victim, Pam Phillips' phone, had traveled in the same direction, implying that Kit had Pam's phone. Absolutely not true. One went south and one went west, I believe.
Right.
Isn't that what they said?
Yes.
And totally different directions. And actually, Pam Phillips' phone went from Pembroke to Elkton,
which is east,
to
not west. It was
Russellville.
actually east. Yeah. Go ahead. And then to Russellville?
And then to the direction of Russellville, back to Elkton. And then at midnight, on the night of the 19th, when the investigations were going on, it went back to Pembroke.
Isn't that something? And they're saying that Kit had that phone. Weren't they sitting right there?
Well, I saw in one of the jurors' statement in EmilioCorsetti.com, you can look this up there. He's doing a book that will come out, we're hoping, in the spring.
It's called I Will Ruin You, paraphrasing.
Yes.
I will ruin you. I'll ruin your military career. I'll ruin everything about you if you divorce me. Joni she was not going to get a divorce from Kit. What she didn't know that Kit found out was that she was never married to him to begin with. So it's like sands through the hourglass, and so are the days of Kit Martin's life. Unbelievable story, how all of this happened, how she took him to the court-martial. Everything you could blame a man for, she was putting it on him. I mean, everything. He
Absolutely.
He took a
And
Roman whip. He apparently took a Roman whip and beat EJ with it. A Roman whip, the very one that beat Jesus on the way to the cross. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
No, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And back to this, the evidence, or Scott Smith, whether he was lying. There's no way that Kit Martin could have had the phone. The expert cell phone records show that. And, even one of the jurors, that Emilio, that's what, where I was going with that. Emilio interviewed one of the jurors, and he said, well, he had a month. He could have put the phone in her yard. No, he did not have a month. Those cell phone records absolutely saw where the phone traveled, where it ended up. And it did not, it couldn't have been Kit Martin. It wasn't even in the direction of where Kit Martin's phone was.
Right.
He was gone to take Emma to horseback riding lessons over in Tennessee at Fort Campbell, somewhere in that area. And, here's Pam's phone off in Elkton, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So, they, in my opinion, they decided who they were going to pin these murders on, and they made their story fit that scenario. And he's a human being sitting behind bars and he's innocent. They just tried to make their story fit. And I don't know why that was so much easier than to actually investigate and find the real murderers who are out there running free today.
That's right. So he did provide some false and very misleading information to the grand jury. And when he was called out on the stand, Lieutenant Smith, when he was called out on the stand in the trial, it got a little bit hairy.
You testified before the grand jury in this case.
Yes, sir, I did.
And when you testified before the grand jury in this case, you didn't inform them that the DNA results from Mr. Martin came back negative.
No, sir, I did not.
You didn't inform them that there were no fingerprints.
No, sir, I did not.
But you did suggest that there was cell phone evidence that put him someplace that was incriminating in this case.
Yes, sir, I did, along with evidence involving the Glock 45 that was recovered from his safe and a shell casing matching up.
But that wasn't what I asked you about. I said in front of the grand jury, you testified under oath that there was cell phone evidence that put him in an incriminating location, didn't you?
I answered your question, yes, sir, I did.
But today, you know that information, that testimony was incorrect.
That information come from a report that I had received from the FBI on not from the download, but from the telephone records from AT&T, placing the phone in the area off of the position of the cell phone records.
But today, you know that information is incorrect.
Today, I know from new technology that's been developed, and the phone has since been downloaded, that the phone was not there, yes.
But that testimony you gave before was in front of the grand jury under oath.
It was prior to the information I have received now, yes.
You didn't go back and fix it.
Go back and fix what, sir?
The fact that you got a charge and an indictment based on false information.
I got an indictment based off of a firearm and a shell casing that was found at the scene and at Mr. Martin's home.
And that isn't the only mistake that you made in this case, is it?
No, sir, I'm human. I do make mistakes.
In fact, you also, as you stated, collected arson evidence in this case.
Yes, sir, I did.
And that arson evidence could have been pivotal, couldn't it?
Sir, the arson evidence is not a requirement for a proof of arson.
It could have told us whether a flammable liquid, some chemical was used in that car fire, right?
It could have told us, but there was already flammable liquid there with it being a car, and the car operates off of gasoline.
More importantly, it could have told us what it was.
Possibly.
And that's why we have the crime lab, right?
We have them, yes, sir.
We have them so that they can help you figure out what happened,
Yes, sir.
so that prosecutors can know what to do, right?
Yes, sir.
And then they can come in here and tell the jury so the jury can figure out what the right verdict is in the case.
That is correct.
But in this case, you messed it up, didn't you?
I filled a container with more information, with more packaging than what it should have had to be able to breathe. Yes, sir.
Even though you've had some training on arson investigations, right?
Yes, sir, I have.
But because of that, we don't know what those results would have been.
No, sir, we do not.
And because of your incorrect testimony, Mr. Martin got charged.
That testimony was very brief to the grand jury. The majority of the testimony that I gave to the grand jury was based upon the Glock 45 that was recovered out of Mr. Martin's safe and the casing that was found off the back porch.
Would you be surprised to know that it was about 1/3 of all your testimony?
I'm sorry, what was 1/3?
The incorrect information you gave under oath about the cell phone location.
From my recollection, my testimony about the cell phone information lasted less than 2 minutes.
Well, you got him charged, didn't you?
I didn't charge anybody.
I have no more questions.
So Scott Smith, he has been in trouble before. And if we can go and talk about Mr. Graham, God rest his soul, back in July, he passed away. Norman Graham is his name. And Norman Graham was an amazing story. He did serve 9 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit there in Christian County. No, actually, it was Todd County. So Todd County is where Elkton is. And that's also, that whole area is where Kentucky State Police Post Number 2 operates. A lot of stuff went down with Post Number 2. And I know you know about some of the evidence of Mr. Graham's case, Stacy.
It was interesting because I read an article, so this is not firsthand knowledge, but Kentucky State Police were investigating of Norman Graham's girlfriend.
Right.
And she was raped and murdered.
Yes.
And they were investigating that. And there were, I think, 2 sets of detectives before Scott Smith. But oddly enough, Scott Smith gets involved and the third time they tried Norman Graham, he gets convicted. And now Norman Graham has passed away. He was only out a few years and he's passed away. And his attorney, Amy Staples with Lovey and Lovey, is continuing the suit. They are suing for the estate of several Kentucky State Police. And oddly enough, it wasn't until Scott Smith and another detective were involved that Norman Graham was actually convicted. Now it is alleged that semen was actually planted on the victim's pants to get him convicted.
Oh my God, Stacy.
Yeah. It's like they make up their mind who they think that done it, and then they're just going to prove it whether it's true or not.
Well, let's just hope that the estate now of Norman Graham goes after him. And I know they were at one time. I mean, that estate was going after his entire estate, Scott Smith's entire estate, not to mention a few other names that we've heard throughout the process. You know, I've also heard the name Silphy. He's a man that passed away back in 2017, but Detective Silphy as well.
I did confirm that with that attorney, and they are still pursuing the case.
Fantastic. I mean, that might just change everything. Hey, here's another thing that's going to change everything. Emilio's book's out in, a little over a month, maybe a couple of months away. So we're looking at spring 2024. I Will Ruin You hitting, shelves, and that's Emilio Corsetti. He does have a cool website, and if you go to the site map and look up some of the Kit Martin stuff, you'll learn an awful lot about this story. If it's confusing to you, it's about to change. All of those dynamics about this story are about to change as soon as Emilio's book is out there on the shelves, because he's going to make it easier for us to understand.
I agree. You can watch Court TV, and thank heavens that Court TV aired this. I mean, thank heavens they decided to do that. So appreciative of that. But even when you watch that, every time I go back to watch the Court TV segments, and you can watch that on Court TV on demand, and, you can watch each person's testimony separate. And I pick up something new every single time I watch that. But there was so much chaos and so many objections for the defense. And it was just really difficult if you didn't know the background to understand it.
Yeah. And do you remember? Oh, my God, this is one of the parts of the trial that was just absolutely fascinating to me. But here's the defense up there getting ready to go over the cell phone data information with the prosecution's cell phone forensic guy, right? And he looks at the report that was given to the defense by the prosecution, looks at the report and says, I've never seen this before.
It was the wrong report.
It was the wrong report that they had submitted to the defense, that the prosecution, these prosecution people, the attorney general's office got a huge black eye. They ended up looking like a bunch of bumbling idiots,
They made the assertion that they had given that report to them on electronically. But why would you give one report electronically and another one on a piece of paper unless you absolutely were trying to confuse somebody?
Right.
When the defense had the cell phone expert on the stand, in the discovery, apparently they had the incorrect report. One was done in 2017 and one in 19, I believe. And that was where they were pulling the information off of, was it Kit's phone or was it Pam's phone?
Both. We need both, obviously, because Joan had the phone. She had Pam's phone, and we know that. And they know we know that. And so it just became this convoluted, chaotic mess again. It was chaotic for both the prosecution and the defense. You know what I'm saying? Yes. And I remember seeing, like, just on Court TV, you can just go down and look at the comments, and people are saying, poor Kit Martin. These people are this was a kangaroo court. This was just completely out of control. Even the commentators at Court TV didn't even know what to do about it. And so that kind of chaos got in the way, and then people were kind of scared off. They were like, oh, man, I just don't even want to get into it. It's just like, wow, sands through the hourglass. Sure, the whole world's against you, Kit Martin. That's what the kind of narrative becomes.
How can anybody watch this trial or any part of it and remotely begin to think that his civil rights and constitutional rights, that there was nothing fair about that?
No.
108, Crystal, 108 DNA samples, and nothing came back to him. Nothing.
If you would like to tip us in any way, I don't mean monetarily either. If you would like to reach out to us and you have some information that could lead to the exoneration of Kit Martin, you can and will remain anonymous. We will protect our sources with all of our might. And those phone calls are starting to happen. The tip line's starting to ring, and we're pretty happy about that. If you need to get a hold of us, it's freekitmartin@gmail.com. freekitmartin @gmail.com. Hit up Stacy or myself. We both check that on a daily basis and several times a day. So anything that you would like to, if you are local there in the Pembroke area, maybe you're over in Elkton, and you have some information for us that maybe you overheard Joni talking about. I would like to know if there's anybody that's listening to this podcast who was in the soda shop when Cal and Joni got into a fight. I heard that happen.
Yes, and I want to also put some people may not want to put it in writing in an email. If you are welcome to call me at 931-273-9724. If I don't answer right away, send me a text and I'll call you back.
Also, there's so many things to talk about here. First of all, I want to know how your visit went with Kit. Let's talk about that because it's important that we reach out to him on a regular basis and probably once a week. I was very surprised to get an email from him today, and he said that you had come to visit and he was so excited to see you and everything's going to be all right. And you know what he did? He thanked me for giving him and you and the family hope. That's what he thanked me for. I know. Isn't that so sweet? I mean,
he called today. I guess you told him I had a cold or something. He called to check on me, and he was he said today's been a lazy day for him. He just kind of took a nap and was able to rest because things are kind of shut down there today. But he's just making the best of a bad situation, the best he can do. He recently got a position as the dean of the chapel. Okay, we're talking about quote unquote triple homicide, and he's the one that's chosen as the dean of the chapel there. It's unbelievable.
Hey,
unbelievable.
I did put the bond hearing, by the way, up on our Facebook page. The Free Kit Martin podcast has a Facebook page, and we invite you to come on over. It's just a situation where you come over and like the page, and then you'll be updated when we have new episodes. We also put these onto, now a lot of elderly don't even know what a podcast is, and that's not even, that's neither here nor there. It's just a different generation. But they do know what YouTube is. So we always put our podcasts up on YouTube. There's a Free Kit Martin podcast YouTube page. So be sure to hit us up there as well. I just wanted to say, if you want to watch the bond hearing, go over and watch it on our Facebook. I just put that up over the last couple of days. You know what I learned from watching that, Stacy?
What's that?
The whole Andy Beshear part of this story, he's the governor of Kentucky, and he got into the governor's seat with less than 1% of the vote. And Kit's
It was 4%, I believe, Crystal.
Oh, was it? Well, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Under 5%. I mean, I've seen so many different numbers as far as that is concerned. We're talking about politics, so you'll see a lot of different polls, a lot of different, but what happened there, Kit was getting ready to get on an American Airlines flight in Louisville. And this was one of the most public national story arrests. This was such a big deal when it happened. Even cameras were standing by. I mean, I remember passengers that were going to be on Kit's airplane saying, oh my God, I kind of felt bad for the guy. It was an unbelievable public display of corruption, in my opinion.
It was horrible. And Crystal, I'm going to share a little quick story with you about that I'm just reminded of. The day that was that May 10th, 2019.
Right.
The day that he was arrested, my mother and father got a phone call from him from prison, and they thought it was a joke and they hung up. He calls his parents. They thought it was a joke and hung up because it's the last thing we would have ever suspected he would be accused of. But literally, you know how there's so many scam calls and fraudulent calls and things that happened out there now, on Facebook and the phone and, scams and things. So they just thought it was something crazy. And when he tried to call to get the family's help, everybody hung up because they didn't really think it was him.
No. I mean, it would be hard to get your mind around a guy like that, killing 3 people. And like, you just got to be like, what just happened? something smelling rotten here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I watched the bond hearing, and then something that that was kind of in my head is this Andy Bashir thing. So Andy Bashir has to send some of his best in if he's actually going to try to pull this off and get Matt and everybody in the Phillips family their conviction. They needed a conviction for what? I mean, they needed an arrest, and then they needed a conviction. And,
Yeah.
all these great facts were getting in the way of their conviction, Stacey.
Well, I think today we're bringing in a lot of different factors. Of course, we're starting the new year, so there's so much.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Matt Phillips, and, my condolences to him for losing his parents. But from my understanding, and this came out in the trial, so I'm not saying anything that's not out there, that he and his, I guess, aunt went and hired an attorney in New York. There was 4 pieces of evidence turned in. All four of them came from Cal and Pam's family. All 4. And again, nothing with Kit Martin's DNA. Absolutely nothing.
None.
And you spoke of the bond hearing. And here's something that, and again, I encourage you all listeners to listen to that bond hearing. But, something that really stuck out to me about it. And in case you don't know, he was, in my opinion, given an unconstitutional amount for the bond. It was $3 million. And that wasn't 10% of $3 million. That was $3 million. So there was no way he was getting out. So I don't call that a constitutional bond. If you read our Constitution, it's supposed to be something that's reasonable. But they talked about the reason he was such a risk. They said he had aliases he had created. Guess what? There's a lot of people that have aliases on their social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on different things. So they talked about his aliases. The other thing they talked about is he's a pilot, so he had the ability. Well, you know what? He was having Kentucky appointed attorneys. So if he didn't have the money for an attorney, it's very unlikely he had the money to run out and get a jet and flee the country. He had known that they were investigating him since 2015, because they were coming to North Carolina and taking hairs from his head and swabbing his mouth and trying to find anything to try to prove him guilty. And so he knew he was under investigation for the 3 or 4 years that it was, and he never left then. All he wanted to do was clear his name.
Right.
And it was, that's it. And it was a shock when he was not found innocent.
And
it is unbelievable.
And think about that, a plea deal, what was it, 5 to 13 years they offered him just to admit it? Is that the going rate for a triple murder? Western Kentucky, what the hell? No DNA, no cell phone evidence. His security cameras proved he was there. The cops were sitting there all night long investigating across the street. They know Kit Martin didn't leave his house. We're finished. 2024 is a different year. It's the year of Kit Martin. We're going to get him out. You mark our words.
Now, I'm probably going to offend some people when I say this right now, but because I know there was a jury of 12 people. But I think, number one, it was all over the place. The trial was all over the place. It was chaotic at best. It was hard to understand. The prosecution at least made up their fairy tale story that they told. And so at least the jury had something they could vaguely follow. It was very confusing. Even the court TV commentators were saying that. So they had a story they could kind of follow. But to me, just the things that happened in that courtroom, like we had videotapes that were manipulated. That was shown by Olivia, one of the attorneys.
And then the cell phone crap, don't even get me started. As a matter of fact, we got to listen to some Jonathan Reeves before we get out of here. Jonathan Reeves, the defense cell expert.
Is that the right way to do a report?
Absolutely not.
So, if there was testimony from that report, and that testimony said that Mr. Martin's phone was outside of his home on the night of the 18th, would that testimony have been accurate?
No, there would be no way to determine if his phone was in his home or out of his home from that report.
If there was testimony from somebody looking at that, from the prosecution's expert report, that said Mr. Martin's phone was on Rosetown Road, would that testimony have been accurate?
Absolutely not. There was no method, no information available that could have pinpointed anybody's location to that degree of certainty. Once again, it's the information we have just shows that it was served by that one site, that one sector. That one site and sector we know covers a very large area, all of Pembroke and the outlying areas.
And you just testified about this, but if someone had taken that erroneous report and had testified that...
Objection, Your Honor. He's questioning the witness about someone else's statements to the grand jury.
Overruled. If there had been testimony that the two phones were actually together on the 19th, would that testimony have been accurate?
Absolutely not. And it would have actually been contradicted by the report.
But all three of those claims were made under oath to the grand jury, weren't they, sir?
Yes.
Happy New Year to you, Stacy. Thank you so much for being my partner in crime. I can't wait to be at the gate with you when this man gets out of prison.
Happy New Year to you as well, and to all of our listeners. And 2024, we hope, will be the year that we see that man walk out of that prison, and I cannot wait.